Hello and welcome. I'm Eric and I'm here to help you to discover biblical truth and to apply it to your life. Now it's January 2023 and many people have made and some people have already broken, maybe even you, their New Year's resolutions. Now a lot of people's resolutions tend to focus on health and exercise, maybe even attitudes or perspectives. But for us Christians, perhaps we need to work on the spiritual side of things as well as the physical and the mental. One of the things that we can do to improve our spiritual lives is to develop the habits of a Christian life. Now, what are these habits? Well, a lot of people call these Christian habits, they call them spiritual disciplines. And this is because they require discipline to develop. Once developed, however, these Christian habits are the activities in the Christian life that should be second nature for us. We do them without thinking. Now, these habits are not just for pastors or leaders in the church. They are for all believers of all ages and backgrounds. Now, why are these habits important to develop? Why should we have these habits? Well, they're important because they provide a structure upon which we can build a life that is pleasing to God. Now, I'm not saying that these are works that merit salvation or maintain salvation in any sense. But these activities are ways that we live out our salvation. They're ways that we show our faith. And faith is should be understood as trust. It's not merely mental assent. It is an active trust. It's not just believing that this chair is going to hold me up. It's me actually sitting in the chair. So these habits of the Christian life embody what it means to be a Christian. And it's how we abide in Jesus and obey him. Now, how do you develop these Christian habits? Well, they don't come automatically to us, as with anything in the process of sanctification. Now, sanctification is a big word, but it simply means that it's the process where we become more and more like Jesus as we live our lives. We grow in holiness. We grow in godliness. In 2 Peter chapter 1, Peter tells his readers that they need to be diligent to grow in several spiritual characteristics. Spiritual growth requires effort on our part. Now, God, of course, is working in us in the midst of this process. He's not letting us do this on our own, but we participate in the process of sanctification. And these spiritual disciplines, these Christian habits that we're going to be talking about, are ways in which we can work to develop that godliness. And once developed, these disciplines become habits. Now, I remember reading somewhere, and perhaps you've heard this too, that it takes about 21 days to develop a habit. However, James Clear writes about habits and developing them, and he says that that's actually a myth. It's not 21 days. One study showed that on average, it takes about 66 days for an action to become automatic. That's just over 2 months. The timeline, though, depends upon you. For some people, it took 18 days. For some people, it took over 200 days to develop a habit. It just depends upon your personality, your situation, your context, the time you have to put into it. Now, that's where discipline comes in. To develop a Christian habit, it requires moving beyond just being motivated or feeling like it. If we're relying on motivation to get us through, well, there are going to be days that we're not going to be motivated. We're not going to feel like it. We're just going to sit there and do nothing. We got to move beyond motivation into discipline, doing it whether we feel like it or not. Now, when we're talking about this, we also need to realize that we should not get discouraged. And it's so easy to do when we're talking about developing habits, when we're trying to do things and we don't see the progress we think we should make. We think we should have it done within a few weeks, but instead it's going to take a couple months maybe even longer to develop the habit. So we should not get discouraged. And we're going to mess up. There are going to be times when we fail, when we forget, when something comes up and we can't do it. We need to allow for ourselves to make mistakes. We're going to do it. Now, perfection, biblically speaking, it's not about flawlessness. It's about maturity. It is about completeness. It is something that we are striving for and we're growing into. We are human, and we're going to mess up. And we should not let that discourage us from getting back up and trying again to work and disciplining ourselves to develop these habits. Now, as with any other habit, we're in developing these Christian habits, we got to remind ourselves we are in it for the long haul. To use a sports thing, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not the 100-yard dash. It's the full marathon. And that's going to require discipline upon our part. We've got to work at it. Now, this video series this is the introductory video for, we're going to be looking at several of these Christian habits. Now, some people include more, but I think that these are the key ones that will be beneficial for every Christian of every age, of every background. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at each of the habits in turn. We'll look at what each one is, and then we're going to look at how we can develop those in our lives. Now, the Christian habits that we are going to develop are these. And we're going to talk about Bible intake, and we're going to do that in 4 parts to break it down so in manageable sections. We're going to talk about prayer. What is it? How do we do it? Why do we do it? We're going to be talking about worship. We're going to be talking about serving and service and how we can serve God and serve in the church. We're going to talk about stewardship, and it's about more than just money. We're going to talk about evangelism, which is for everyone. We're going to talk about missions and what that means and how does that apply to me as an individual person. And then lastly, we're going to talk about discipleship, because Jesus' followers are his disciples, and each believer, every believer, is to be a disciple. And we're going to talk about what that means. Now, some of these videos will be a little shorter, some of them will be a little longer, and so we'll just deal with the topic as we come through it. Now, I'm hoping that this series is going to be of some benefit to you. Now, perhaps you are on the track, you've already begun developing these, maybe even you have the habit already. What I'm hoping is that this will prompt you, and it'll help you to strengthen you in what you're already doing. Now, perhaps you haven't worked on developing these habits. You've maybe got 1 or 2, but there's still some more you need to work on. Or maybe you don't understand what it is when people talk about prayer, or when people talk about evangelism or stewardship. You're hearing these Christian words, these church words, and you don't know what they mean. I'm hoping to be able to help you to understand that. And not only to understand it, but to bring it into your life, to apply it so that you can begin developing these habits and discipline yourselves to develop these habits in your life. Now, this video series should come out about every other week. So look for the next video in about 2 weeks from today. And then in the next video, what we're going to be doing, we're going to begin talking about Bible intake. And we're going to look at 2 different things when we're talking about this. We're going to talk about hearing God's word, because believe it or not, this is a habit to develop. And we're also going to talk about meditating on God's word and what does that mean. Now, remember to subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and that way you can be notified when the next video becomes available. You can stay in touch. You can keep track and figure out what's going on. And be sure to check out some of my other teachings. I have a number of playlists that are already out there of various teaching videos and some sermon series that I've got going on. And maybe one of them you can find useful for your own life. Well, until next time, thank you for watching, and God bless.